Hello there, welcome. I'm going to be talking about The Glare, Best Served Cold by Joe Abercrombie. So I just finished Best Served Cold a little while ago, and I have a lot to say about it. I have a lot of thoughts, so I just want to talk about it today. So Best Served Cold, if you have never heard of it, is the fourth book set in Joe Abercrombie's first law world. So there was a trilogy he wrote, The Blade Itself, Before They Are Hanged, and Last Argument of Kings. That was the trilogy. And then Best Served Cold comes next, publication-wise, and also chronologically in the world. So it's a standalone, but again, it just follows the trilogy. So Best Served Cold is set in the fictional land of Styria, or Styria. I don't know how you pronounce it, but I say Styria, so that's how I'm going to say it. So anyways, it is set in this land, which is comprised of a bunch of independent city-states. Monza Mercado, who is the main character of this book, is the leader of a company of mercenaries who are employed by the Grand Duke Orso, and he rules one of the city-states in Styria called Talons. So Monza is betrayed and left for dead by her employer and other people she thought she could trust, because he's worried that she was gaining too much power and becoming too popular among the people, and that one day she was going to try to steal his throne or just threaten his rule in general, I guess. So because of that, she vows revenge on all of those who wronged her. 7 men. She also bands with a bunch of other people who can help her get the revenge that she wants. And it is a merry little revenge party. So Best Served Cold is the fourth Abercrombie book I've read. I did read the trilogy, and now I'm on to this one. So by now I think I have a pretty good sense of his writing style, his plotting style, all of that. And honestly, I love it so much. I think he is one of my favorite authors currently. Every time I read one of his books, I'm just so happy because I'm like, this is written so well. It's like the way that I want something to be written. It's like my perfect writing style because he puts his characters forward. So I just love it so much. So yes, I did love Best Served Cold. I rated it 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. I absolutely loved it. I had the best time reading this. I'm going to have this first section be non-spoilery, just like talking about the book and what I liked about it. And then I'm going to have a spoiler section at the end where I want to actually talk about specific things that happen in this book. So what I will say is that if you think characters that were in the First Law trilogy showing up here is a spoiler, meaning that they lived through that trilogy and you know, they're still alive, then probably don't watch this, because I'm going to talk about some of those because they're just prevalent and main characters in this book. So just a little warning. But other than that, I'm not going to be mentioning any spoilers in this section. So anyways, let's get into it. So as I said before, I loved Joe Abercrombie's writing in this. I think, like I said, he's one of my favorite authors. I really love the way his writing is character focused. It's just really effective at drawing me in and making me care about what's happening, because he gets me to care about his characters so deeply because I feel like I know them. So I will talk about characters later. I'm going to shut up about his characters. Obviously, that is his greatest strength, in my opinion, and probably a lot of other people's opinion too. So enough of that. So as far as the plot goes, this is kind of a typical revenge plot. There's nothing new necessarily or like genre bending or anything like that, but it's the character journeys we see that make it worthwhile to me. I think it was well paced. This is a 600-page book. Like you can see, it is a chonker. It's pretty chunky, but it's not super big. Like it's not too big. That's what she said. What I really like is that he breaks it up into sections by location. Each location they travel to is its own section. So that really just breaks it up nicely and makes it feel kind of more manageable. And each little section has kind of its own ebb and flow. So it's like each section had its own climax and resolution and build up and all that stuff. So it's kind of like, it was like multiple mini stories almost put into one bigger story. So I really liked the way it was constructed in that sense. I also think that the plot was generally pretty unpredictable. I did just say that this is like a typical revenge story, but even so, there's like these little beats and little twists and turns that happen that really just keep you interested and again, just kind of reinvigorate the story and just make it so much more exciting. I will say I am usually pretty bad at guessing plot twists. I don't know. I don't think about them while I'm reading unless they're like glaringly obvious. So I am pretty bad at them, but also I wasn't able to really guess pretty much anything that happened in this. Like all the little twists I didn't guess. So it was just really exciting. The last thing I want to touch on before I get to characters is just the way that Abercrombie writes battles and fight scenes. And I want to talk about this specifically because the way that Abercrombie writes battles and fights is just so unlike any other author that I've read, really. And I don't know if that just means that I'm really poorly read, or if he's just that good. But the thing I really like is, it all comes back to that character-focused, character-first writing. If there is ever a fight scene, I think that a lot of authors, what they do is they kind of like come back and look at it from a distance and act as if you were seeing it from like a camera, like a security camera, and you're seeing the blow by blow and all that stuff. But what Abercrombie does that I really like is he's inside the character's head, so you can know what the character is thinking during the fight, what they're feeling. It gets so personal that it makes me really invested in what normally is kind of a boring section of any sort of book or chapter. Like, I usually don't really like fight scenes. I really like them in Abercrombie's work because of the way he writes them. And that is definitely true of Best Served Cold. On top of that, the amount of fear that he has his characters feel is, again, just so unique to his books. I haven't read another author that really makes me feel scared along with the characters because they don't want to fight. Like, they don't want to participate in a battle. Even for seasoned warriors, they still get scared and they're feeling terror before a battle and just nervousness and anxiety and all that stuff. I love it. Obviously, it's not fun feelings. It's not fun to feel this way along with the characters, but I like that it just gets me there and it puts me in it. And just the way he approaches violence, I really like too. It's never glorified in his books. It's never like, oh, this is so cool, It's usually like it's bad. It's always bad. It's never seen as a good thing, and none of the characters like it unless they're truly depraved, in which case, yeah, they're supposed to be bad then. We're not even supposed to like them. So, I also just like the way that he writes fighting and battles really realistically. I feel like no one ever talks about, again, this could just be me not being well read, but I feel like hardly anyone ever talks about the soreness that people would feel after they've been fighting a long time, or the fatigue, or lasting effects and lasting injuries. I love that he puts that in his books, and he definitely puts it in Best Served Cold. So that is an aspect I really, really like of Best Served Cold and just Abercrombie's books in general. Okay, let me get on to the character work. So as I said, the character work is masterful, as always. He just presents everyone as such realistic, flawed individuals. And I will say realism isn't always the height of writing. It's not always the best thing ever. But in some ways, it gets you to connect with the story more and connect with the characters more. So I think that's what he's really good at doing. He writes characters so consistently that I always understand everyone's motivations and desires and decisions, even if I didn't necessarily agree with them or am on their side. I understand them always. I also liked all the really interesting relationships that Abercrombie created in this book, because we have a party, a traveling party, a protagonist party, I like to call it, because we have a lot of different characters and different personalities in this one kind of traveling party. It makes for some really interesting dynamics, and he really just bumps it up. And I don't know, I feel like everyone had drama with at least one other person. So it was always really interesting to read. Okay, Monza. I liked Monza as the main character. I liked seeing revenge, this theme of revenge, through her eyes. I also liked that Abercrombie actually gave her flaws and made her not a perfect person, which is more than I can say of a lot of other authors, especially at the time this was published. Male authors do not like to give their women flaws. They like to make them just perfect, and they think that that's a strong character, which is not true. So I just really appreciate the fact that he just treated her like a real person, which I know is a low bar, but I still appreciate it nonetheless. So we see her fail often. We see her succeed, but we also see her fail, which I just really appreciate. And again, just really endears me to her and just helps me connect with her. And I want to see her succeed. I'm with her. We're in her head a lot. I want to see her win and get what she wants in the end. I think that's always good with a main character, you want to be on their side, you know, for the most part. And I think Abercrombie executed that well here. And like I said before, I like seeing revenge through her eyes. I liked seeing her internal journey with revenge throughout the story. I liked how it affected her and how it brought things up from her past. I just think Monzo was a really good main character. The only other character I'm going to talk about in this section, and I'm not going to talk about a lot, I just want to say Shivers probably had my favorite arc in this book. It wasn't necessarily a good arc, but it was effective, I will tell you that. I'll discuss him more in the spoiler section, but yeah, I think he probably was my favorite arc of the whole book. So, that being said, this is sort of the end of the spoiler-free section. The only other thing I'm going to say is I would wholeheartedly recommend this book 100%. It is a little dark. It's, you know, it's not the happiest book, but it's a really good time. And if you just want to read a book that has just amazing characters that you can really connect with, read Best Served Cold. Just do it. It's great. I also think you can probably read this without having read the trilogy. Like, if you don't really want to commit to 3 chonky books, you know, I think you could get away with just reading this one. There's going to be some things you're not going to pick up on, some references, some things, little things you might be confused about. But overall, I think you would be totally fine if you just read this one. So that is my spoiler-free review / discussion of this book. Okay, now onto the spoilers. Click away if you haven't read this book and are planning to at some point. Okay, so Shivers arc. I want to discuss Shivers arc in the spoiler section. Obviously, if you're watching this section, you probably know, but if you don't, Shivers, who was a character in the first trilogy and the first law, what he wants at the beginning of the novel is to become a better man and do good in the world and give good to the world and just be better. You know, he comes from a really violent society. He is a soldier in a sense, and he just wants to be good. But this world does not let you be good, and it does not reward you for being good. And just to see Shivers get beaten down by this world and like basically be forced to revert back to being not the best person and not make good decisions and act on his impulses and all this kind of stuff, it was a little bit hard to swallow. Even so, I still think it was a really strong arc. And what I liked about his arc, even though it was sad, like it made me very sad, is that I was able to follow the thread of the arc really well. And because of that, and because we were in his head so much, I wasn't completely crushed by the fact that he like didn't grow. He like grew backwards. I wasn't crushed by that like I would be in probably like any other book where I'd be like, no, how could you do this? You know, because we're in his head so much and we see all the things that happened to him, it was easy to understand him and understand why he made the choices that he made. And that is why I love Abercrombie so much, because he can get me to understand these things that are horrible. But like, I can't blame the guy, you know? His arc also made a lot of sense for this world. I think if he was truly able to become a better person, it wouldn't feel like First Law anymore. Unfortunately, it felt right. Also, I just want to say the ending fight between him and Friendly was like so good. I was really like on the edge of my seat during that. It was really exciting. I didn't even know who I wanted to win because I like Shivers, but I also like Friendly too. I love Friendly a lot. Friendly was really fun. I didn't want him to lose. And I also was like, yeah, Friendly, you get him. You do what Casca told you. It was really fun. I like that fight. Okay, Casca. I want to talk about Casca. I didn't even want to mention him before because I think that even his presence is a little spoilery because of how he's introduced in the book. Like, it's kind of a surprise that he's there almost. Like, he's not there at the beginning. So Casca, I loved him. I said I liked Shivers' arc the best, but I think Casca is the most interesting character. Just the way that his personality is so interesting. He's almost like happy-go-lucky, but he's in dire straits all the time at the same time. I don't know. He's just really fun. The way that he was able to shift from this almost comic relief type character to an incredibly shrewd, cunning, not quite backstabber, but like, you know, if you read the book, you know what happened with him and the Thousand Swords. And it just showed his true potential and just how complex he really was. Even these characters that seem kind of almost one note-ish, they're not. They're truly complex, and Casca's a great example of that. It was just wonderful. It was really incredible. I didn't guess what was going to happen with Casca and the Thousand Swords in general. Like, That whole entire arc was really well done. And the fact that he's just like freaking unkillable is so funny. I know that it was kind of a thing before, like, oh, you can't kill Casca. But then I thought he actually did die during the, when Gammark killed him. Well, killed him. I did not see him coming back and being alive. So I absolutely did not see that. Also, I really liked the like little antagonism and rivalry between him and Morveer, the poisoner. That was so funny. I just like their dynamic. Like they hated each other. And how it all came to a head at the end too. I thought that was really well done. That was so exciting. Just like Shivers and Friendly's kind of battle at the end. Morveer and Casca at the end. Oh my gosh, so good. So satisfying. Such a satisfying ending for both of them. Also, the fact that Morveer technically got what he wanted in the end, it's like to be remembered and legend status revered, but in a bad, like not in the way that he wants at all, because everyone's just going to be cursing him forever. Poetic, man. Okay. Shanked. That's a mouthful. I just want to talk about him briefly, even though he's like a really minor character, because I totally didn't guess his reveal and his true, character, but I was certainly waiting for it. That's not to say that I like forgot about him the whole time. I was just like, whatever, this guy is just whoever. Like I knew he was going to be more important. Otherwise Abercrombie would not keep cutting back to him. He really built Shanked up effectively to me. I did guess he was an eater. That much was pretty apparent to me because of, every scene he was in. But then at the end, like the very end, I'm talking after the reveal of, the fact that he was the bone collector, when he revealed that he was like totally against Valent and Bulk backing Monza and Talons, I was like, wait, why is he so against this? Like, this doesn't make sense. But then I remembered that Valent and Bulk is backed and like created essentially by Baz. I was like, this makes so much sense now. See, and that's something you would not pick up on if you didn't read the first trilogy, which is fine, but it makes it all the more sweeter once I remembered that fact. And I was like, oh my gosh, it makes sense. So I loved that. I loved like that reveal and like just putting the pieces together in my head. It was so satisfying. Also, I just want to say the way that Shanked's like assassination scenes were written was like really wild. But the fact that the carnage that he left behind was always, I feel like weird saying this, but it was almost like really creative. I was always interested to see how he was going to, people. I don't think he ever dispatched someone the same way twice, which was interesting and just like a really interesting choice. It was fun though. It was very interesting. Yeah. Interesting is the best word for Shanked. I was in awe. Scared, but in awe. Another moment I want to talk about is the massacre at Cardates, the House of Pleasure. That whole sequence was just wow, incredible. It was horrific and really bad, but at the same time, it was like this beautiful chaos that was really incredibly written. The way he managed to write all this chaos, while at the same time being so easy to follow, it was so clear. The way that I was able to follow it and not be totally confused was just amazing. So I just had to talk about that because I think that was a really incredibly written sequence in the book. The last thing I just want to talk about is the ending. I wanted to mention the ending because I've seen when other people talk about Abercrombie's books like this and the First Law trilogy, how people are just so depressed about his endings and how they're all so bleak and hopeless and all this stuff. And I have to say, I don't understand that completely because, first of all, I think it makes sense as far as the story goes and the tone he set and the world he's built. So I haven't been disappointed by his endings so far. And in fact, maybe it's because of that, because of the world he's presented thus far, I'm like way happier with the endings than I thought I would have been previously. I don't know. I think I just expect that his endings are going to be just like this bloodbath where everyone's dead. It's going to be like a Shakespeare tragedy where no one freaking lives at the end. So the fact that most of his characters come out unscathed at the end, like they might have injuries or they might be worse mentally, but they're alive still, is like kind of a win in my book. And a lot of times they get what they want in the end. Whether or not they get it in the means they desired is, questionable, but I think his endings are generally pretty satisfying as far as my experiences have been. Obviously, there's not going to be a happily ever after I think if there was, then that would be totally out of left field and just weird and wouldn't feel right. But like I said, they are satisfying to me anyways. I also like that he gives a good amount of time for a resolution. I read so many books where the author will put all their eggs into the basket of the climax and make that really big and bombastic and exciting, but then have the resolution be like 5 pages, you know. I like that he takes his time with his endings. He really builds them up well. It makes the climax feel very exciting. And then there's time to come down. There's time for some falling action and some resolution and just kind of sitting for a little bit and making sure we see the endings for everyone. I like his endings. I don't know. I like them. They just go down really smoothly to me. So anyways, that is pretty much all I have to say about Best Served Cold. As I said before, I absolutely loved it. I am really excited to start The Heroes because I know people really love that one too. If you read Best Served Cold, I would love to know what you thought of it. And if you read Best Served Cold and have read the other standalones, I would like to know where this ranks on them. Like, is this better than The Heroes in Red Country, or is this like the worst of the 3? Because if that's the case, I would be totally happy because like if it only gets better from here, that's amazing. But anyways, that is all for me. Until next time, just have a really, really great day. Farewell.